What's up, guys? So in this video I just wanted to share how to rebalance your liquidity positions without incurring too much impermanent loss, right? Because if you do it wrong, a lot of times you're gonna lock in those losses, and it's just you're gonna be at a net loss, right, when the token arrives back at the original price you entered at. So, if you do it wrong, you could be in a lot of pain and lose a lot of money. And this is not financial advice. This is just sharing what I have learned. I've spent a lot of money and time to learn this, and hopefully you get some value out of it, right? So, all right, let's dive in. And before we do that, let me show you guys just the result of my portfolio, how I've been doing. So a lot of these positions, some of them are fresh and new, so the data is not that accurate. But as you can see, these positions date back to November 26th. And since then, the market has corrected quite a bit, right? But as you can see, versus just holding the tokens I entered the positions with, I'm still up about $6,000 something, right? And I've claimed over $11,000 in fees. APR is hovering at excuse me, at 65%. So I mean, the APR varies based on volume, but I'm doing pretty decently, right? And before we even go down to the strategy on how to rebalance, let's look at how not to rebalance, right? So this is an app called Beefy. If you don't know already, what it does is if you see here, right, it sets the range for you, and then when the price is about to hop out of range, it rebalances, and then it tries to track the price movement, right? And you would assume that it gives you more fees, right? Let me refresh this real quick. You would assume, right, that doing this would give you more fees, right? It auto compounds for you too. So technically, you should be getting 186% APY, right? So if I put in $100, 1 year ago, I should have $186 by now, right? But that's not the case. If you look here, right, August 29th, ETH is at 25.22. Now ETH is at 27.44. It actually hasn't moved much, right? Maybe less than 10%, around 10%. So in theory, right, the impermanent loss shouldn't be that much, since you're getting back into that original price, right? But this is where it's wrong, right? If you look at this price tab, basically the value of the LP, basically, right? When you first started, if we look at the original price, right, the first three numbers is on top there is 991 when you first started, and right now it's 959, right? So it's a net loss, right? 991 minus 959 divided by 991. So you lost three something dollars on the, if you put in $100, right? So why is that? Is because they keep rebalancing, right? And you're incurring too much impermanent loss relative to the fees. And I mean, this loss is not always the case. If the pair is like highly correlated, then maybe you're getting off easy. But in my experience, a lot of times you're losing money by doing this, right? Because like, let's say you're here, right? You're 50% ETH and 50% USDC. The price pumps. You're all into USDC, right? Or mostly into USDC. You're forced to rebalance and buy ETH at a higher price, right? And then when the price drops, right? Like recently, your pool becomes like, all into ETH, right? And then you're forced to sell ETH into some USDC to maintain the lower range. So, you're basically buying ETH at a higher price and then selling ETH when the price drops. So it doesn't make any sense, right? You're losing money every time you rebalance. So this is another even more extreme example. Similarly to Beefy, Gamma, auto compounds, auto rebalances. If you can see, they set like the ranges really, really tight, right? Like upper range, $3,200, around 3187, base lower, 2951, right? So super tight ranges, and then what happens is like, okay, you might outperform ETH a little bit, but when ETH goes up, right, ETH definitely outperforms. You catch up a little bit, and then you ultimately underperform if the asset is volatile enough, right? Because you're constantly rebalancing, locking in that impermanent loss. And if you can see, like, you might as well just be holding like ETH or like wrap stake ETH to gain some yield, right? Because if I started here, with ETH, my ETH would have only dropped in value by like 6% compared to back in April 6th, right? Compared to January 21. This is not even the latest data, but you see like the Gamma position is down 32%, even with all the fees, right? Same thing, another Gamma position here. Slightly wider ranges, but still, it's getting wrecked, right? Like you can see briefly, it's outperforming just holding ETH, but by the if you compare April 25th to right now, right, February 12th, ETH dropped in price about 12%, but your position dropped in price by like 40%. So this is what you don't want to do. Set the ranges too tight, and then you rebalance the hell out of it, right? So in comparison, let's compare it with one of the pools I have been running. So this is like definitely not the best entry, but it's doing really well compared to what Gamma is doing, right? Those automated positions are doing. So right here, I entered back in December 1 a new position. I have 52,000 something dollars, right? Right now it's only down to $45,000, right? But I still have like 1,000 something dollars in unclaimed fees, and versus just holding the assets back here, right? If I just hold these assets, I'm up like $2,000. Versus hold is basically how much you're up by compared to impermanent loss, right? If this number is negative, then you're not doing well. All right, APR is only 60%, but let me show you what happens if the position pumps back into range, right? So in this position, I deposited like 6 something ETH, almost 30K USDC, around $52,000. I collected like a little over $4,000, but I only compounded around half of that, right? I probably put another half into some other positions, right? But either way, let's just simulate. This is basically what I have right now, right? We hit simulate position performance. Future price 36.79 is basically what my average starting price is, right? When I put it in, also like factoring the compound, but the compound is not that much. And like this position it's been like 2 months, a little over 2 months, right? 2.5 months. But if it comes back to the original range, right? Original price, I would basically have zero impermanent loss, right? The LP would be $54,000 something, which is like $2,000 something more than what I started with, right? Not even including the fees that I didn't compound, right? It's just this plus this amount, right? These two deposit amounts. And if you're, bullish on ETH like I am, then like basically all the fees are cherry on top. Whatever I put in this this range at this price, as long as it comes back to that original price, I would be nicely in profit, right? I'm still outperforming versus just holding whatever USDC I had on hand and ETH, right? So this is quite good and exactly what you want when you're providing liquidity on a bullish asset, right? So I'm pretty sure I have rebalanced this once or twice, and let me show you what the better strategy is, right? Compared to what all these automated tools or beginners are doing, right? So before I do that, like there's some rules, right? Number one is you don't want to be providing liquidity for projects or tokens you're not bullish on. Like, let's say you bought a lot of ETH and like you're bullish on ETH, then it makes sense to provide liquidity for ETH, right? And like, but if you're like, let's say you're bearish on Sol, but then like the APR is nice, it doesn't make sense to hop into like Sol USDC or like, pulls like Sol and Radium, right? You really want to like LP positions that you think is gonna appreciate in value, right? Otherwise it defeats the purpose, because you're basically accumulating those two tokens. And the reason why I do have some ETH and stable LP is because I want more ETH, right? And I want more stablecoin for income or for like, reinvesting into other areas. So that's another rule, right? So number one, don't LP tokens you're not bullish on, right? Because what happens is like, let's say I just entered a new Arrow token around this price, right? It drops by like, almost 20%. Like what you don't want to do is like when the price drops, you kind of panic and like you sell these assets when the prices are down, right? And that's gonna happen if you don't have conviction in the tokens you're providing liquidity for, right? So, and the hard rule, hard and fast rule number two is you don't want to rebalance until you need to, right? Because when you rebalance, a lot of times you're incurring some impermanent loss, even though I'll show you guys how to, have less of that. But let me show you why, right? You don't want to rebalance immediately. So let's say I have the range set at $3,100 to $4,100. I mean, this is already like quite a tight range, that because like if you look at the weekly chart of ETH here, right? Like the price bounced from the Bollinger Bands, like here. It's not gonna stay up here, right? But let's say you do, um, because of the fees or whatever, right? You did this. What's gonna happen is if it drops out of range here, right? You want to wait 48 hours before you rebalance. The reason why is, see, like the day after, it pops right back into range, right? And then it kind of grinds in the range, and then it drops out of range again, right here, right? January 28th, and then it pops into range again. And it just helps you stay in range for longer, right? And then when it really drops here for more than like 48 hours, and then the chart is looking like, okay, it might grind here for a while, right? Then you might want to consider rebalance, right? So the first strategy is the snuggle rebalance. So like after looking at the gamma LP, we definitely don't want to be doing this, right? Like from here, let's say you started at like ETH is at 3,500, like even better entry than what I had, right? Instead of like just, okay, 50-50, 50% ETH, 50% USDC, all right, it dropped out of range. Let me just sell half of my position here, right? And you're thinking, okay, it might like, drop more, so that's fine. I'll end up with more ETH. But the problem is like you're locking in impermanent loss, right? You're selling ETH at this cheap price, and then like if it moves against you, right? It pumps out of range up here. You're selling at a much lower average price than if like it pumps back here, back to your entry with the original range you have, and you basically incur no impermanent loss, right? So instead of doing that, one strategy is just a snuggle rebalance. You drag the lower range right back here. Let's say it drops to like, somewhere $3,500. You find a good time to rebalance. Let's say it's $3,700. It's a lower range, right? You're still 100% in ETH. When the price dropped, right, you're converted into ETH. But then like a few days later, the price is slowly, dropping, getting into range. And when it comes back here, you'll still incur some impermanent loss because you're still like, selling ETH at a lower average price than what you had up here, right? But it's much less than if you just did this, right? All right. So that's one way to do it. And, if the price keeps dropping, let's say it drops to like $2,000, right? You could always drag the range all the way down here. Yes, it's going to be less fees, but it's going to be worth it because like if it moves against you, and I do expect like we're going to get a pump, before the bull market ends, it doesn't make sense to, tighten your range down below here, right? The one thing that might make sense is if you have a lot of stable coins on hand and then you want to get a tighter range here to get some fees, and you already have some ETH and you expect it to pump, right? But anyway, that's besides the point. Another way to incur even less impermanent loss, let's say you had a bad range here, is like you drag the range down here, and then you also drag the range up here, right? And of course the fees are going to be lower, right? But you're incurring less impermanent loss. So it's up to you what you're trading it for. In my opinion, like I don't really want to chase APRs because it's like, the market is really volatile, and like you can never tell if it's gonna like, stay in this range for how long it's gonna stay in that range, right? For example, this chop we have back in August to November, like you might be doing good for like 3 months, right? And then boom, bam, it pops out of range and you're incurring impermanent loss. Or if you start with USDC, that's fine. But you're missing out on the cap, capital gain, right? Like you're missing out on the appreciation of ETH. So, but yeah, if you expand those two range, then you incur even less uh, impermanent loss. And another way to do this is like you drag up both ranges, but the bottom you make it slightly lower. Like let's say 5, you put in like 5% USDC, right? You sell 5% of your ETH or something. Like really low amount if you care about the fees that much, right? If you really want the fees that much in the first place. So yeah, and just to recap, like when you're entering and exit positions, you're not really doing it in a vacuum, right? It depends on your holding, and it depends on like your market outlook, what the technicals are saying, what the fundamentals are saying, right? If I hold a lot of USDC, for example, and I want to get into ETH, then it makes sense to enter at these range lows, right? And like when it pumps higher, I make more USDC. I could think about, just withdrawing or like, just keep it in range and doesn't matter. I'm accumulating both USDC and ETH, right? And I mean, like these strategies work for all it doesn't matter what you're providing liquidity for, right? Just the base asset is different. So I mean, if you it works the other way too, right? If you enter like a tight range in here, it pumps out of range. Let's say 2 days, you snuggle up, it's still not dropping, right? It's okay. You just keep dragging up, dragging up, dragging up, right? That's fine. Um, or expand the range both ways, right? But I mean, as you can see, the way to mitigate impermanent loss is like to snuggle the range one way or the other, and like if you're doing that all the time, why not just start with a wider range, right? It doesn't make sense for me to like keep a really tight range unless like maybe stuff like Sol BTC, the range could be tighter since there's a bit sorry, that's Sol ETH. There's much more correlation, right? If you look, but you can't really tell until like after the fact. If you look here, right, like a 60% wide range would cover most of the it's gonna stay in range most of the time because it's highly correlated for like over a year now, right? Because like Sol and BTC has been doing quite well this cycle, right? But you never know when it's gonna shift, and like when the thing does move against you, in my opinion, is much safer uh, to do a wider range, right? And if you have like $20,000 to $50,000 in crypto, in my mind, it makes sense to allocate a portion of that. Let's say half. I personally put about half, if you include like my NFT holdings and stuff, into LPs because you're earning these fees while you're waiting for like the bull market to play out, right? And if you're like an ultra bull, you could also enter into pairs like for example, I have a big bag of Pixel ETH. Pixel is like a gaming token, and Pendle, right? Pendle is like a DeFi token. It's been like the TVL's been climbing. It's in my mind is still undervalued if we're gonna see an alt season, right? ETH and Pendle, so you're accumulating both assets into this bull, right? Before the bull ends. And if you look at the Pendle and ETH chart, you can see there are periods where like Pendle outperforms ETH, and like you're accumulating these two solid assets, right? So that's it for today, guys. Thanks for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed, and if you need help with the LP stuff, feel free to DM me on X if you have questions. All right, peace out.